Okay, good morning, everyone. DENT 1159, week 1, project 1. This model may look like your project 2. Well, it is. I wanted to this year possibly use different models to apply the same rules or apply it to another model. I find that when we're using the same model, and then I do my demonstration, everyone comes to the front, and they just grab my model and they copy it exactly. Well, that's not the real workplace. Although what is similar, though, it is a Kennedy Class 1 bilateral free end lower. I'm going to make an occlusion rim. So why would I need an occlusion rim for the bilateral free end lower? I mean, it's obviously dependent on the opposing dentition, especially if it's a full denture or a large span Kennedy Class 4, we'll be taking bite registrations. Those bite registrations will either be centric occlusion or centric relation records. If it's a full upper dentition, a full upper dentition would take centric occlusion. If it's a denture, a full denture or a long span, meaning losing canine guidance of a Class 4, then it would be a centric relation record versus a centric occlusion record. So sorry if I confused that issue, but if we have a tooth-to-tooth contact here in the anterior, it would be a centric occlusion record. A full denture on the upper or a big anterior edentulous space partial, then it is a centric relation record where we need to establish group function. Regardless, we're taking a bite registration. Now this bite registration is just in the posterior section. If it was the anterior section bite registration, we were going to use it for midline, low lip line, smile line, in the anterior, or canine lines in the anterior. But in the posterior section, both basically vertical dimension and occlusal record. That occlusal record could be centric relation, could be centric occlusion, and another occlusal record would be protrusive record. That protrusive record we'll be using to establish condylar guidance in group function, which we're going to go and talk about more in DENT 1159 in full dentures. Needless to say, with the posterior edentulous missing, we're doing occlusal height, vertical dimension, and those bite registrations. If this was a maxillary, the third bite registration is we would use this occlusion rim for a face-bow transfer to establish the maxilla in relation to the condyles versus an average value mounting to establish in Bonwell's triangle. A mouthful, yes, but we're going to repeat it over and over and over again, because other than those 4 or 5 statements that I've just mentioned, there's nothing additional to that. So my first step is, even before picking up this pencil, is it comes from the model department. Did the base of the model, was it trimmed flat or in one plane? This is for many reasons. One, to establish the occlusal plane, whether it's the edentulous section or the dentate, parallel to the base. This is going to help you in mounting. It's going to help you in setup. Also, a flat base, if it's keyed, will help you in processing. We don't want an odd base. It's going to help you in dismounting off your articulator. So the model sets up for many different things. Again, being a bilateral free end, this should be border molded in the posterior section, meaning we need to create a custom tray, or that final impression has to replicate the extension of the borders and the width of the borders, where the attached and the detached mucosa starts, where the attached finishes and the detached starts. Now, the astute dental technician, I'm going to guesstimate it's probably the full depth of the sulcus here. Now, I created this model. It's a fictitious model, but the full denture must also cover the retromolar pads. This is a base plate / extensions of the posterior section. Now, this is not the finished denture, but I'd like the bite registration or the occlusion rim to have the same extensions as the full denture. Therefore, another reason why this occlusion rim is used for, not just for those registrations, but also patient expectation on the extension and the size of the denture When the client loses their posterior teeth, the tongue will fall into the neutral zone here. Then when the denture is introduced, the tongue will be constricted. Now, if we don't constrict that during the treatment phase, it's a big surprise on insertion day. And it's like, well, my old denture wasn't like that. A lot of consultation has to happen with the client to have success. The major connector of the occlusion rim and or denture should not sit on the lingual frenum, should not go past the internal oblique ridge into the undercut area or the myohyoid ridge, must cover all the anatomy on top of the retromolar pad, detached mucosa around the buccal frenum, and any undercuts can be blocked out. Now, this is going to be for a cast partial treatment, but the procedures for an acrylic partial or an immediate denture would all be the same. So let's not try to compartmentalize our learning here. It spans across all the same three treatments. So once I've outlined my major connector or the extensions of my occlusion rim, those extensions are going to be in light cure with a wax border for patient comfort. Especially we're just guessing at the extensions of the free end. So we want to really err our judgment to put this border in wax so by the practitioner it can be adjusted quickly. There'll be some slight guide planes in the major connector. This should sit like an acrylic partial on top of the cingulums above the height of contour of all the natural teeth. Again, patient treatment expectation. If this doesn't have a positive seat on the model, it won't have a positive seat in the mouth, therefore creating an inaccurate registration, whether that registration is relation, centric relation, centric occlusion, or protrusive. We'll have inaccurate registrations. Inaccurate registrations, meaning inaccurate try-ins, meaning resets, remount. So you can use a brush, you can use your finger to separate now, to create a barrier of separation between the gypsum, calcium sulfate, to the light cure base plate material. I'm going to use Vaseline. I think DENT Supplies sells something that looks like Vaseline. It's called Model Release Agent, but it has the same petroleum properties. So I need to be a little liberal with my Vaseline here on the model. I don't want to have any part of this model to fracture. This is my final impression. I'm going to create a cast partial denture on this final impression. So I can't have any of this model chip, break, abrade, wear down. Therefore, it's going to create an inaccurate framework. As you see all the procedures subsequent to follow, there's 29 steps, if not 32, that we're going to have to go through where these errors could occur. So you got to minimize each step, kind of increases your chance. So if you were to see undercuts on these natural teeth, then I would suggest to block them out. And you can block them out with a base plate wax. And what I'll do just to experiment or show you, you've done this last year, but you can just use some base plate wax without the use of a surveyor parallel to the path of insertion. You think you can use your visual perception. You can block these undercuts out. The problem is, if we use this block out material a little bit too liberal or too much, then the base plate becomes really non-retentive or doesn't sit positively or less accurate to the model. If this is less accurate to the model, then we're going to have, again, inaccurate registrations. So I'm going to take my light cure material. I've drawn in pencil. Now you can take any instrument you wish, whether it's your Zale Carver, your Lacron, your number 7, scalpel. You can use any material, any instrument you wish. And I'm posting this on the YouTube channel, so if you had fallen asleep to the melody of my voice during the class, you can review at a later date when you're further awake. Now, I'm not even near the extensions. I just want to eliminate this one so I can stretch it a little bit. Now, you can see this is kind of tacky. It would help if you want to put a little Vaseline on your fingers, and then it won't. I find this one I had out on the bench here was a little bit warm. So I'm going to use Vaseline on the top, just so my fingers don't stick to the light here. Now you can see here, if I put too much pressure, I'm going to thin out the base plate. We don't want this base plate now to break, especially in the patient's mouth. That would be setting up a lot of alarm bells for the client during a bite registration that something should fracture. I'm just going to lift this up a little bit higher so I can see what I'm doing. There we go. I'm going to take, I can almost see my pencil line through the base plate. Again, the base plate's not a finished product. So some people like to create a career out of this base plate procedure. The base plate is a tool that we're going to use to get correct registrations. Also, possibly not in this case, but in many others, we're taking the bite registration to establish that vertical dimension so we can see how much vertical clearance we have to create the framework, to minimize any interference in the occlusion, and therefore minimizing any adjustments that have to be done chairside for the practitioner. You minimize adjustments, you're minimizing time, then lo and behold, you're becoming a valuable member of the dental team. And we all know the cliche, time equals, less time equals possibly more revenues. So we'll leave that for another day, that conversation. Now, as you can see, I'm cutting this well short of my borders. I'm not trusting that the dentist's alginate here, because I know they didn't take a custom tray, had fully replicated the length here. And the last thing I want is to overextend and cause any pain of the patient or the occlusion rim to, let's say, spring or bounce up, creating inaccurate registration. Remember what I'm using this for: to register vertical dimension, whether it's centric relation or centric occlusion. That's it. And with that measurement comes information to me. I'm choosing tooth size. I'm creating the free end side of my saddle in my framework. I'm creating rest preparation height, width, and depth. So all that information I need. Now, we talk dollars and cents. What's the occlusion rim? $35 to $45. Is that a career? I don't think so, but it is basically the lost leader of the cast partial dentures. That this is a diagnostic tool that we're creating that is much needed. What I see happening in the marketplace now, oh, how much? $40 diagnostic tool? Let me go without it because I got away with it last time. Little do we know the practitioner got away not using one when there was a tooth-to-tooth contact with canine guided occlusion in a Kennedy class 1, 2, or 3, possibly even 4. But they fail to recognize that each edentulous scenario is different, requiring different diagnostic tools. And this is our job here, is to understand what diagnostic tools we need at each time, so therefore we can ask for the correct information. So being a part of the valuable dental team is offering information to the practitioner like treatment plan. Is that our job primarily? No, but it has slowly become the dental technician's job through complicated procedures is treatment planning. And if we can do this at the same time as create valuable prosthetics, then I think we've got basically very advantageous to the dental team member you will be. Kind of like the actor. Not only can he act, but he can sing and dance. You will be the triple threat dental technician. Look at that. It only took me 16 minutes to get off topic. I gotta be honest, I think I've got off topic a lot sooner than that. So what I'm here is I'm surgerizing the extensions. The longer I spend here adapting the light cure base plate, then the less time I will spend trimming. So you decide what you want to spend your time on. This here, I've got all the time in the world to adjust the extensions here. Now again, I'm cutting on an angle which is perpendicular to the extension, so therefore I keep the width of the tray so it's not sharp. We have a sharp tray in the patient's mouth. It doesn't take much to figure out what's going to happen with that sharp edge. And again, that sharp edge, I'm going to coat with base plate wax, even making it more pleasant for the patient's experience, the chairside experience. This is all going on behind the scenes. The dentist has no idea what I've done, except created a better experience for the client. They will just be reactive to what the client is saying. So again, in the anterior apron area, it's tapered over the cingulum, approaching the incisal edge. I'm going to go over with my tapered burr to smooth this out. Now, if you feel that these coverages of the retromolar pad are in occlusion from let's say a super erupted 8 on the maxillary, then you can cut this short and have it in wax. But I know that the opposing dentition here is going to be a full denture. So I have more room. Unless they've got giant tuberosities from an ill-fitting denture over dozens of years. Now this is actually our project 2 that we're creating a framework for the denturism. But I find that if I use the same model, like I said, that we're using, you'll just come to the front and copy my lines and not really apply any of the principles to your model except just, monkey see, monkey do. Oh, that's where you drew the line? That's where I'm drawing my line. This way, you'll have to make a choice, a decision with your own pencil of where the attached and detached mucosa is, which I think you can do. So I'm going to light cure this real time, 1 minute. So while that's curing, we can rediscuss the reasons now of why do we need an occlusion rim for the Kennedy Class 1 partial. Number 1, VD, vertical dimension. I heard you laughing. Vertical dimension. Number 2, to take what registrations? Centric relation record, which is group function. This it will occur if the opposing is a full maxillary denture or a long span class 4 where there's no canine guided occlusion. Basically, we're reestablishing in centric relation the position of the condyle in the head of the condyle in the glenoid fossa in the most retruded position, unrestrained, is this centric relation record. Now, are we choosing centric relation? No, the dentist is. But this is what it's used for. Number 3, centric occlusion record, where this position is fixed. We cannot open vertical dimension if tooth-to-tooth contact exists. This occlusion rim will be used to take a centric occlusion record. So, let's go over them again, the top 3. Vertical dimension, centric relation, centric occlusion. If there's anterior space missing, obviously midline. Canine line. Number 6, low lip line or smile line. This would be in the anterior section. And if it was a maxillary, then the last registration would be protrusive bright record. If it is a maxillary occlusion rim with no canine guidance, protrusive bite record to establish condylar guidance to program our articulators to simulate that mandibular movement of the client. Did I miss one here? Vertical dimension, centric relation. Obviously high lip line if it's a maxillary. One other thing that is really underestimated is the we're going to call it the buccal corridor, or the width, or the extension, or the lip support, or the cheek support in the posterior section. Now there is a neutral zone, so we're just going to call it neutral zone estimation. So this occlusion rim, if your rim is off the ridge too much, you're going to be extending into the neutral zone, and if we put teeth there, there'll be cheek biting, tongue biting, etc. This one here is highly underestimated because a lot of dental technicians are programmed to put the teeth like Lego in class 1 all the time. This, in our full denture class, we will talk class 1, 2, 3, cross bite, and 0 degree setup in all scenarios. So you need to commit those to memory for week 2 quiz of the purpose of the partial edentulous occlusion rim, which is really similar to the occlusion rim of the full denture, except that it's only half of the reasons depending on how many of the teeth are missing. In this situation, we're missing 5, 6, 7. But because there is a free end here, now we're into establishing the length and width of the border in the posterior section. We've got the myohyoid group of muscles here to be concerned about, the genial glossus especially. We've got the buccal frenum here to be worried about. The last thing we want this denture to do, whether it's in the cast form or acrylic denture base, is to be bouncing up and down when the patient's talking. Not a real good look, so to speak. Not to mention the trauma it would cause to the underlying dental structures would be disastrous. So I'm going to turn the suction on here just for a second. And the rough edges that I created when I was trimming, I'm going to smooth them off. Now I took my time generally pretty good there, trimming the extensions, no lingual frenum interference, nice and smooth all the way around, no sharp edges. If you look at the rubrics I've given you for this in the occlusion rim, follow each step. Number 1, base of the model. 2, extensions, smooth borders, major connector extensions, above the height of contour in the posterior, above the cingulum in the anterior, appropriate thickness, no thin spots. If you feel that you've pushed too much and you've got a lot of flex in yours, you can always go back and add some more if you wish. Or you could have done 2 to begin with at the start. I mean, I've seen very many creative things here with dental technicians putting in paper clips, etc. Or if you think the dentist you're working with has the hand of a giant with a touch of 200 pounds per square inch, then maybe you need to stiffen it up a little bit more. Although I find if I create this too thick, then the psychology of the patient during the treatment plan is like, well, my old denture's not that thick. Even though you'll explain to them that, hey, this is a diagnostic tool to establish these 8 things we talked about, they don't care. They just say, well, my tongue interferes with this, and then they're going to talk like a lisp. And then if they have this negative feeling, let's just hope they show up for the next appointment. So there's a lot riding on the occlusion rim. Yeah, all $38. I'm just guesstimating. Is just as important as the final prosthetic. Fair or not fair, that's another discussion. That's just the way it is. For all you golfers out there, the 1-inch putt counts just as much as the 250-yard drive. The occlusion rim is equal to the importance of the treatment plan as the acrylic, the teeth selection, shade, and setup and function. Therefore, as you can see in your rubrics, I've given it a value of 10. You might say, well, that seems to be a lot. Well, without that, we can't achieve anything else. As you can see, I'm free-flowing wax on all the edges of the occlusion rim. I'm making this buccal corridor or to the extension all in wax. Now, you'll work in a lot of laboratories. They'll say, well, who showed you that? Oh, that Karolitis guy? There's a reason why I did this, and I'll explain it again. I just don't do it for fun or sheer laziness or shortage of light cure, that this impression would probably be overextended in algin. And the last thing I want to do, chair side, is taking out a handpiece and start trimming. And then the client's going to say, hey, what's wrong? Why did you leave? What's all that noise? And I'll say, oh, well, I just overextended the base plate. And then they're going to say, well, didn't you know how long to make it? I mean, there are all kinds of things you must be prepared for. And a lot of them, we put the patient last in the treatment plan. That they're just the subject in the chair. But really, we got to put them first. Because their mind is going when they're in the chair. They're not just sitting there as a compliant, let's say, victim to the treatment plan. They're saying, hey, what's going on? Why does it feel this way? Why is he doing that? And you can explain it, but really, chairside, there's no time to explain what we've learned over 3 years or 5 years or our career of 15 or 20. We just give them sometimes what they need to know. And this dictates the dentist's, let's say, chairside manner, or bedside manner is called in the medical profession. Were they short? Were they rude? Were they dismissive? Right? And then now we're going to get into a whole host of the psychology of psychodynamics of the client, right? Was it a female? Was the patient of a certain minority or marginalized group? And then their spidey sense of inequity may be a little higher than that of the mainstream. So you really need to put all those things aside and treat everybody equally with the same, let's say, lab bench chairside manner and, let's say, bedside manner at the dental office. And that goes even further. How does the practitioner treat their laboratory? Right? If you notice, most dental offices or most dentists will use the dental technician as a possessive word. This is my dental technician. Not this is the laboratory that I choose to create my products, or this is the company I deal with. They say, no, these are my dental technicians. So that speaks volumes in itself. But we'll leave that for another day. I'm just filling in the airwaves while I'm filling in the wax gap here. So as you can see, I haven't rushed to fold a big blob of wax, which I see many students or beginners rush to do. Everyone thinks there's a shortcut. Well, I just gave it to you. Anything short of this is the long way around. But everyone says, well, that's a waste of time. But really, you could even use that time to tell a nice story to your neighbor, as I've just told you. There's no rush here. Except when you go to rush, you'll just be creating more work. So I free-flowed wax all towards the extensions of the base plate. Then I'll go and roll up some base plate wax to express all the air out. I'm going to heat up the wax on the model first, as you can see this, because obviously cold wax is not going to become homogeneous with hot wax at once. They both got to be roughly the same temperature. And then I'm going to go and apply the base plate wax. Now, this is where most technicians will start to say, wow, this wax is soft. It's not like the wax I'm used to using. All the excuses come out right now. But you need to adapt to your situation. And I think that's the strength of the dental technician, is to adapt to each situation. Each patient is different. Each treatment is slightly different. Definitely every patient is different. Even though they might be missing the same number of teeth, but they're different size, shape, position, length, height, width, color. So, but I find that, the individual that preaches about, oh, I want to be spontaneous, I like to have change in my life. Once you change something like the wax, that's the wrong thing.
I think so.
As you can see, I've done one side already. You can do both sides at the same time. Now, bit of a slob, so to speak, here. I got distracted. Oh, I had blue wax in my knife. That's very good, isn't it? We'll clean that off. And I can use my fingers and my hand to shape the above the height occlusion. Just enough, because we're going to register here. This side as well. How wide? Well, the width of the denture teeth, 8 to 10 millimeters, I think is our suggested width here in the posterior section. Right? Stay on top of the ridge, because these teeth on the lower, just like in full dentures, are going to be on top of the ridge, regardless of the type of occlusion it is. If it's class 1, 2, or 3, it doesn't matter. And then I'm going to... Oh, I'm off screen. I'm sorry. Ooh, messy. Yeah, the wax a little bit soft there. So I'm going to flow wax all the way down because I really want that border to be well established and waxed, nice and round, smooth. So a little extra is not going to hurt there. There's many ways to do this, but I think this is will give you decent results. You can use your alcohol torch a little bit. Try to create more one piece. Make the wax a little more homogeneous. Especially on the lingual side here, I missed. Sometimes I get busy talking and off subject, enjoying myself. I forget the whole lingual side here. Okay. There we go. We're going to... Now, you can wait till this to kind of get hard. You can blow air on it. You can put it in cold water if you're in a super rush. Or you can sit here and enjoy your coffee, talk to your neighbor. But you can see that this is about 8 to 10 millimeters. If I want to get a ruler, yeah, it's 10. I'll shave it down. Now again, the bite here is for 5, 6, 7. I'm going to reduce the coverage of the retromolar pad because it's usually tight vertically back there. You know, the patient doesn't open up two pieces like this. There's more of a hinge. There's a hinge to their opening. The hinge access. So I'm going to take this off the back. We don't need to create occlusion on a retromolar pad back there. Right? Even if we drop a bicuspid and just go 2 molars, we don't want any occlusion on a retromolar pad. Again, it's still soft, so I'm kind of shaping it. Putting blue wax speck in it from the bit. Looks like that was from the sprue wax. It's okay. Keep it clean. I'm going to give it a few more minutes to harden up here. At the same time, I'll shape the extensions. It should be somewhat of a denture. Do not cover the buccal side of the tooth like I did here. It should come straight down the guide plane. No wax on the occlusion as I'm taking it off. No wax above the anterior teeth. Now, the better fitting the occlusion rim, then the more positive seat it will be in the mouth, and therefore the better chance of taking accurate registrations. That's it in the bottom line. And then your job as the beginner dental technician is to do this in a expedited amount of time. So therefore you can do something else. Is this glamorous? Playing with wax here, a little bit of acrylic or like your acrylic? Not really, but it is a necessary. As even after, I don't even want to say how many years. 35 years. Ouch. Still playing. Oh, more than that. Oh boy. Still playing with the wax. Making base plates. Naturally, you become the manager, the owner. Then I would think this would be an entry-level job because there's not really much damage here you can do other than to the final model. You could take my knife here and start chipping teeth off. This would be a disaster. I could make that light cure to scrape teeth, right? So I think every job in the laboratory is important. There is no, let's say, menial job. I guess sweeping the floor, but this is important too because you don't want to slip on, dust. Yeah, so the skills here in waxing up the occlusion rim are the same transferable skills of waxing the festooning the denture, the same transferable skills in a full denture, same transferable skills if the medium happens to be acrylic or inlay wax or light cure. I mean, really, it doesn't matter what, we adapt to what the material is or the medium, and we should be able to therefore create any scenario with any product. And I think that's the biggest learning curve in dental technology is when, materials change. Now we're into how the zirconia behaves in the mouth, and then the milling, and certain parameters and thresholds that can be up to bond strengths, all kinds of things, and how it feels in our hands, right? And then I think that's the difference between a good day and a bad day. Sometimes things just don't work out, and then we start fresh the next day or the next case. This is still soft, but I'm entertaining you with stories from the bench. Try not to scratch the model, scrape the model, chip the teeth, scrape the teeth, abrade the model, right? Keep the model clean. If you get any wax that's going to stay on there that doesn't come off or you can't scrape off, then steam it off from the steamer or boil it off, because presentation is also very important in the dental laboratory. I mean, this is going to go and be presented to the patient chair side to be put in their mouth. And you could use the analogy, you go to a restaurant, would you put the dirty fork in your mouth? No. Even the one with spots doesn't look appealing to you. And that $40 entree might not be as appealing as is. So really, everything is important here. When I'm creating an occlusion rim, it's definitely for the those what did I come up with? 8. I'm sure there's another one I missed, but those 8 reasons and registrations. But really, foremost in the front is the patient. The psychodynamics of the patient undergoing treatment, right? Increasing their confidence that this is going to be okay. There's enough compromise in functioning with the denture, whether it's cast partial or acrylic or full. There's enough compromise to the client already that we need to give them confidence that this compromise is better than the alternative of going with nothing. And this is a big deal, Now, I'll be back in a second. I'm just going to cool that out. I lost patience waiting, so. As you can see when I take it off, it's almost seamless between my light cure and my base plate wax. Should be the same extensions of a denture. Nice and smooth, not sharp. I've got wax border here. Why the wax border again that I chose? Because I find these days the dentists are not border molding, and if they're not border molding effectively in the free end or in a denture situation. So if I do it in wax, then this can quickly be with a knife reduced chairside if it's overextended. Plus it's more comfortable for the patient. I mean, that's just the biggest reason right there alone. I don't have confidence that the extensions are correct. Well, I have confidence that my guess is correct, my educated guess at the attached and detached mucosa, but still, nevertheless, I'm going to err on the side of safety and saying, well, maybe I didn't guess correctly. We'll make that nice and smooth. No sharp edges, no flakes, no breaks. And we'll put this back on the model. And then here we can finish it up, make it smooth. A little alcohol, a little. Too much will spoil the business there. So what are we going to take away from today? Well, one is making the occlusion rim, and two is knowing why we're making the occlusion rim. Commit those to memory. Whether the dentist gives you all of those registrations or not, anything less of those would be a shortcut. Every shortcut, please caveat to the error. Not necessarily all the time, you can get away with it, but we need to know what we need in order to create optimum prosthetics. This is a guesstimation of the height of occlusion. I'm just a little bit above. I don't know if there's overextension in the back, but if it's a full denture, I've given the dentist time to parallel and room to parallel this occlusion rim up with the opposing dentition in centric relation or occlusion. Centric relation for the full denture. And it's parallel to the base of the model. It's somewhat parallel to the plane of occlusion. If these teeth are not even, then I must guesstimate or pick one spot that the left side equals the right side for some symmetry, or they're close to thereof. And you can polish this up with a little cold water, a little soap if you want to. You can wrap it up in gold leaf paper if you want. But whatever's going to set you apart now from the other laboratories in competition, the color of your box, the type of delivery car, the color of it, the wrap, I don't know. I mean, this is where marketing now, takes over. Because functionally, the occlusion rims out there should all be very similar and functional. So, I leave that with you. You're going to create one now for your Kennedy Class 1 bilateral freehand. Most likely I'll do another video and do that model for you just to reinforce what we've talked about. I didn't have my presentation in front of me, but you'll see that on the other video with the lecture if I've missed one of these registrations or occlusal records or my occlusion rim. Not all apply obviously to the Kennedy Class 1 bilateral freehand partial. Many practitioners will try to get away without this. They say, well, you can freehand articulate, the patient's got, full dentition, and it kind of locks in there. That's fine too, but just be wary that if there is any small chance that you can't register that centric occlusion positively, then I think this would be an interim step. Make a partial occlusion rim, establish the bite, mount it, create the framework, and then move forward with setup for try-in and then process to finish. Thanks for your attention, guys, and I'll see you next time.